Turn off that knob.
Like my new necklace?
Is it a recorder?
It's a recorder, just in case I say something worth remembering tonight. Never know. It happens every once in a while.
Like for about 30 years.
I'm hoping that by the end of this class, I can present this well enough to where everybody can agree with me that there is nothing on the planet more important for each and every one of us than what we're going to talk about tonight. It makes all the difference in the world because we've always believed that we have choice in life, right? You know, because we see ourselves making decisions, and according to our choices, we either benefit by what we choose, or we have to suffer the consequences according to our choices. But we feel because of that, we always have choice. But the reality is, for the most part in our lives, we are programmed robots. And the principle that determines that end result, that determines our circumstances, is the principle of expectation. We've heard it all of our lives that life gives us exactly what we expect, no more and no less, but exactly what we expect. It's like, it always reminds me, the principle of expectation always reminds me of those mail slots in the door. You know, that's kind of like the principle of expectation, because the mailman can't get anything more through that slot than the size of that slot. Okay? That's kind of like our expectations. And we are the monitors. We are the ones that determine that. What is going to come into our lives. And it's almost like we have a set slot, a certain size, where we will receive whatever can come through that slot. And if more tries to come through the slot than our expectations, who is it that pushes the extra away? We do. Because we unconsciously are the meter that determines how much good can come into our lives. Now, the starting point to really bring clarity to this whole subject, I would say we need to look at the master principle that determines everything in our lives, and that is the principle of cause and effect. And if we do not honor the principle of cause and effect, we are the ones that will definitely suffer the consequences of our foolishness, because that principle dictates the outcome of every circumstance in our lives. Now, just below that one is another principle, and it is the most direct and immediate principle that determines the outcome of all of our circumstances. And that is the principle of focused attention. Okay? Wherever we hold the focus of our attention, the subject matter is interwoven into our lives, and it becomes an intricate part of our circumstances. Now, if we have, this is why commercials that are repeated over and over and over have such an influence on the sales of a particular product. Because if you see the same thing repeated over and over and over, you just automatically gravitate toward that familiar subject. Well, what happens if we have negative thoughts that keep getting triggered up and running through our brain in the same fashion, over and over and over again? This is what happens when we get triggered. Okay? And so what we need to do tonight is make sure that we understand the process of triggering, what is triggered up, why does it happen, and what are the results of it. So I want to make sure that I get that covered as clearly as possible tonight. But in the meantime, there's another area that I want to clarify, and that is, in fact, I'm hoping that this whole class will help clarify why I keep telling everyone that the body is literally the crystallized form of our emotional habits. Okay, we keep hearing it over and over again that we are what we eat. Well, the reality is the crystallized form of the body is really the result of what we feel emotionally. We eat according to how we feel. We live according to how we feel. And so what we need to do is find out what is it that is determining our emotions. Now, there are many people that have focused their life's work in various areas of the same subject. Louise Hay, Deepak Chopra, they've done much writing on the fact of the correlation between our thought process and the structure in the body. Hair analysis is a very scientific model that shows that according to our emotions, it establishes certain mineral ratios and certain mineral levels, which then determines the function of every gland and organ in the body. One of you last week mentioned to me about Dr. John Sarno. I checked Dr. Sarno out. Dr. Sarno is a professor and an attending physician in two facilities, rehabilitation facilities over in New York. And he, several decades back, started observing. When he was moved into these positions, he was diagnosing and treating the same as other doctors, and as he says, I was just as ineffective and unsuccessful as everybody else that was doing the same things that I was. And he said, I started observing that there were people that had bulging discs, calcifications, different physical tears and structural issues that should be creating pain, but there was no pain. And in others, there was no physical sign of problem, but yet extreme pain. And then, of course, a combination of structural problems and pain. But he observed it long enough to realize that, hey, wait a second, there's another factor here going on. And it got him looking deeper into what is the real source of the pain. And so, through his research and observations, he started realizing that the actual pain was caused by oxygen deprivation in that particular area. It wasn't the bulging disc or the nerve. It was the blood flow and the oxygen being deprived from that tissue that caused the pain. And after many years of observing this and working with different patients with their pain and trying to figure out what is causing this, why is the brain doing this, he made the link that helped him now to become at least 90% successful without therapy, without anything else. He sits down and he talks to the people with the pain and says, what is it that is overwhelming you? What is it that is stressing you? And he figures out the cause. Remember, we got to recognize we live in a world of cause and effect, and that principle is dictatorial. It isn't suggestive. He's sitting here thinking, okay, now here is a stress-induced, self-imposed issue, but why is it happening? And he's realizing that there are several reasons. We have the accumulative responses still within us, because here's another point that I don't remember if it was him that pointed it out or where it came from, but this is something that has been known for over 100 years. The subconscious mind has no grasp on time. It doesn't, what happened to us, a traumatic event at the age of 8 or 10, the subconscious mind can't tell the difference between that happening back then and issues that happen to us when we're 50, 60, or 70. It's all present. It's all now. And so you can understand how when we get triggered, or if a problem gets triggered up from a childhood traumatic experience, it's going to be present, and it's going to be here and now, and it's going to be a stressor. Now, as we all know, the medical model claims that most conditions have a basis in stress. Well, through my observations, I found that almost 100% has a foundation in stress. And so that's going to be a key factor here to keep in mind. But accumulatively, whether it's childhood issues or what we're dealing with today, accumulatively, it's almost as though the body says, okay, I can't deal with this. And we get on an overwhelm of whatever form. And that type of stress is what causes the brain to respond in the way that it does to diminish the blood flow and the oxygen to particular areas of the body. Now, I think a greater clarification could come about by bringing in findings from German New Medicine. David has been after me for months to review some DVDs that he's left with me, and I finally got around to doing that a couple times, and realized that Dr. Hammer discovered back in 1981 the scientific validation of all of this. But he observed what I have seen now as being the activating mechanism that determines the development of the disease. And it's usually caused by an actual current unexpected trauma. Okay, now I'm going to separate the difference, because the main subject of tonight's presentation is going to be that long-term accumulative preparatory in advance of that unexpected event that is at the base of the development of a serious disease. But it doesn't even have to be that serious. Dr. Hammer found that through CAT scans, they were able to see specific areas of the brain that associated with particular areas in the glands and organs. Both are affected. It's almost like a triangle between the brain, the event, and an area of the body that will then develop a problem. And in each area, the brain and the organ, it will show a target ring that specifically marks it. Like, okay, there is where a tumor is going to develop. If the issue is not resolved quickly enough, okay? Now, I don't want to make it seem like, okay, once the event happens, you're in deep doo-doo because you're going to develop a problem. No, it all depends on how we respond to the event, because that is a major cause of all of our problems, is not necessarily what happens to us, but how we respond to the circumstances in our lives. It's kind of the evolutionary process of life, is not to avoid difficulties or run from them or hide from them, but to learn how to discontinue our reactivity. As human animals, it's very difficult for us to refrain from reactivity. We see exterior circumstances as being causal and ourselves as being effect. And that's kind of why hell was invented, to evolve us to the point of seeing and recognizing ourselves as cause and circumstances being the effect instead of the other way around. And that is very vital in our creation of, you could say, a bulletproof body, is shifting our perception from being the effect and seeing ourselves as being cause. Make sense? Okay, and all of this that we're talking about is an evolutionary process to make that perspective shift from being the effect and taking the position authoritatively as being cause. Okay? Now, the most destructive force in our lives is a part of this meat bag. It is our belief system. Now, what is a belief system? We believe that it is one of our greatest assets because we all gather a collection of beliefs. We start out with these beliefs from parents, school, friends, church, all of our influence. And we have this, coming into adulthood, we have this whole bucket full of beliefs. And those that just don't feel like they serve us well enough, we have the opportunity to take them and throw them out. And those that we find along life's way that seem to serve us better, we put into our collection. So we have this bucket of beliefs as adults. Every one of us have them, whether we like it or not. Now, if anybody comments negatively on the contents of your bucket, what is the human response? Defensiveness, which is a fear-based reaction, right? Yes. Okay, now there are two aspects of each one of us. There is the brain and body, and there is soul. Now, soul has zero fear, but the brain and body is actually a survival mechanism. And every form of survival is driven by what emotion? Fear. So when you really evaluate all the contents of this bucket, in reality, every component in there, no matter whether it's true or not, and unfortunately the majority of them aren't really true, but every one of those is a survival mechanism. That's all it is a survival mechanism. Whether we have in there that the moon is green cheese or whatever, it doesn't matter what the content of this is. We defend it with fear because we are not sure that it's the truth, and we're afraid that if anybody invalidates anything in that bucket, we might not survive. Now, what would happen if you took that whole bucket and ran it through a shredder? Would that be a good thing or not? Depends.
Our identity goes away.
First of all, what would the brain think if we shredded the whole belief system?
Scary.
The brain would absolutely freak. It would say, "Oh my gosh, I've lost everything. There's nothing left." What would soul have to say about that?
Liberation.
Liberation. The soul would say, "My gosh, I don't have to listen to all that baloney anymore." Okay? Now the reason why that is so important, to bring that out, the difference between the belief system, which is all held right here in the little house of horrors, between our ears. The reason why this is so important is because until each one of us get it, that as soon as we can stop being guided by our beliefs and start listening to intuitive guidance, we will be butting our heads against the wall. Now, how often is intuitive guidance correct?
100%.
100%. How often do we listen and obey?
1%.
To the degree that we ignore intuitive guidance, which is absolutely pure wisdom in our personal best interest, to the degree that we ignore that, The body suffers, our lives suffer. We keep butting our heads against the wall. Therefore, if you stop and think about it, if we were to practice nothing else but just listening and obeying intuitive guidance, there is absolutely no reason to suffer another day in our lives. To the degree that we listen and obey, we'll be guided wisely in how to take care of the body properly, how to live our lives without pain and suffering, and live our lives successfully in whatever form the heart considers success. Okay? No beliefs at all, just pure what the heart anticipates or knows the true meaning of success is. Okay?
How do we know the difference? Is fear or is intuition?
That is a practice. That's one reason why we don't listen and obey 100%, because we don't know if it's coming from our head or our heart. And so first of all, it's like accomplishing anything in life, we need to develop sufficient desire to learn the difference and pay attention. The main reason why we're confused is because we have never taken the time to just stop and observe and pay attention. And we've all known that we are wise enough to either step into harm's way or out of harm's way. We know that as a fact. But why is it that we keep stepping into harm's way? It's because we haven't taken the time to listen to this guiding system. Okay, now the body is actually a barometer. It's a beautiful, beautiful barometer that is always telling us how we're doing with these principles. Okay? Because the body is designed brilliantly to repair itself and to maintain a balance of health. Now, with the attitude of therapy or treatment to the body, when you stop and think of the wisdom of the body and the intuitive guidance that is always there telling us exactly what to do and how to do it to take care of the body, and because we don't listen and we consciously choose self-destructive things to do or to impose onto the body, and the body starts breaking down, developing various forms of disease, when we come along and have the attitude that we're going to fix the body, can you see what an insult that is to the innate wisdom of the body? It's like if you shifted yourself into the position as being that wisdom, and you see the conscious mind coming along claiming that it's going to fix you, it's like, hey, wait a second. I'm designed to normalize all function and keep the body running perfectly. Your conscious activities is destroying me, and now you're going to come along and fix me? What's wrong with this picture?
Yes.
Yes, David?
We're a couple of us back here listening to the wisdom of our body and feeling it's a little warm or no.
Oh my God, David in the air conditioning.
Dean, could you give
I'm
some...
triggered.
What did you say?
You in the air conditioning. Now I'm triggered.
Janice is triggered now.
Throw that bucket out.
Shred it. Run it through the shredder. Okay. Okay, with everybody getting a clear picture now of the difference between the fear-driven survival mechanism and the essence of unconditional love and wisdom, we see the two expressions within the body. Now it'll make it a little bit easier to go into a deeper understanding of what the real collective problem is and how to solve it. Okay, every one of us, before we're born, each of us make at least two decisions. Okay? We choose the date that we're going to be born. I know our parents feel they had something to do with that, but we have a window where we could choose one window or the other, and either window that we go through, and keep in mind the wisdom that is surrounding us at the time of birth is so far beyond our ability to even conceive that. But, we think we have some pretty smart computers and pretty smart people here. Before we're born, the brilliance that is around us goes far beyond the greatest computer. But it helps us to be guided in the date to be born, because we're coming into this mass of cycles and patterns and systems. And depending on when we're born, those influences help guide us with our life path of our own choosing, the path that determines our challenges and the major focus of our lives. My own path was that, go figure, it was of a scientist and a teacher. Others, each one of us chose a different path according to our desires and our needs for this lifetime. The other decision that we made was an entire course. Like it was like going to a college and selecting the major course that you're going to study. And the neat thing is, all we had to do is choose this meat bag, and the meat bag was already programmed with the whole course. Isn't that interesting? Now, what is that provides our training? Okay, before we get into that, I want to point out a very important aspect of life, and that is the reason why we've come. Everybody know that we had a reason for coming here, not just self-harassment. The reason we came is because we wanted to become wise. Now, back home, we were completely surrounded by wisdom. You'd think, wow, why leave home? If we're surrounded with wisdom, hey, maybe some of it would rub off. Well, it didn't. Why? I'll give you an example of what we're all like. Every one of us in these meat bags are all the same. We can't get out. We can't deny it. How many times does a wise mother need to tell the child, do not touch the stove, it'll burn your hand, before the child learns? 50,000, 60,000? How many times? Okay. When does the child learn? When they put the hand on the stove. Now, isn't that the way that we're all learning most of the lessons in life? Touching the stove, experiencing it ourselves. That's what you call being forced to become wise. And that is the purpose of life, is we are here to be forced to become wise, and after we've gone through enough hell to force us to become wise, then pretty soon we get to the point to where we will become wise enough to where we can listen to wisdom and learn from it. But as long as we're here, we're proof that we haven't got it yet. But that is, in a nutshell, the purpose for life, is to be forced to become wise. Now, here's a practice that we all can engage in. We've already concluded that intuitive guidance is pure wisdom, right? Okay. Again, the body and life are the barometers that will help us to see how well we're doing at listening and obeying wisdom. Right? That's the shortcut through life. That's what meditation is all about. Is just listening, learning to listen. That is a good way, as you asked earlier, Maria, how can we know whether it's a thought or whether it's intuitive guidance? Practice through meditation, listening. Ask in the mind and listen. And through practice, we can hear the difference between our thoughts and wisdom. Okay? So all of these pieces will help us to lay a groundwork now. Part of the program that we chose with the body, in fact, the whole program was made up of traumatic experiences that will go back at least 3 generations. Those are the challenges that get triggered up in our lives, and because of the subconscious mind looking at these issues again and again and again, if we haven't mastered those patterns within our lives, what we do is we recreate similar circumstances in our daily life. Again and again until we learn the lesson and conquer that issue. Now, what is the link that links us back to all that stuff that we carry here and here in the brain and in the DNA? The brain works exactly the same as the immune system in this way. If the immune system feels like it's under attack in any form, it will scan its chemistry memory to determine how it was attacked in a similar way so that it knows how to defend itself here and now. The brain does the same thing. The difference is the brain can go back through the DNA at least 3 generations. If there's something in the 4th generation back that is traumatic enough, extreme enough, it'll pull it all the way from back then. Now remember, the subconscious mind has no ability to tell time. Everything is ever present, and when a circumstance is triggered up, it's going to be present. It's going to be a memory. It's going to be like a commercial that is running again and again and again. If we, now of all the stressors in our lives, how many of them did we invite into our lives? Were those our choices? We chose these? Yes, every stressor in our lives is self-inflicted. When it was chosen, it was an exciting part of our lives. It was something that we felt was going to enhance us, whether we knew it consciously or not. Yes, that's its purpose, to enhance our lives. Now, every one of us have stressors in our lives right now that really we've outgrown, we've already learned the lessons from, we can let them go. And so, actually we could take a moment. This will be a good, easy solution, because we can really take a huge burden out of our lives by doing this little practice. Basically, all it is taking a notebook and listing out every stressor, even down to the squeaky door, or the little broken thing, or the little project that we thought we wanted to do, but we're not willing to give ourselves that time. Every little stressor, because if it's something that we believed that we wanted to do, and we decided, yes, someday I'm going to do that, it's like a burden on our back. And all of these burdens weigh us down and rob our energy. Almost as bad. You ever notice the correlation between the function of your colon and the condition in your closet or garage? Watch. Clean out a closet or the garage and watch how much better your colon will work. Life is a magic trick performed with smoke and mirrors, and the environment and every person around us are those mirrors that reflect who we are and what we're about and what projects we're dealing with. In fact, a very brilliant thought came from Harvey Cohen when he stated, if it impacts on you, it is you. That's how you can know whether it's your poo-poo or somebody else's poo-poo that you're dealing with. Because if you feel it right here, or if you feel defensive or whatever, you can be assured that it's inside here, and the other is only a mirror, which there's a very simple way of looking at this, and that would be to imagine yourself standing there holding a candle in front of a mirror. Now, to try and change the other person or the external circumstances when it's impacting on you is as foolish as trying to blow out the reflection of the candle. Okay? Only when we recognize that the candle is in our hand and we blow it out. In other words, it's impacting on me, therefore it's inside here. There's something that needs to be healed in here. And then what the person is reflecting to me will no longer affect me. Right? As long as it's not okay for another person to be foolish or however they are, if it's impacting on me, it's something in here that needs to be dealt with. And that pretty well, all of those issues can be placed under the umbrella of healing through the portals of time. Because when we're reacting to the actions of others, it's because their actions are impacting on us. It's activating something that is going on inside of us. And in almost every case, it's a traumatic memory that is being triggered up. Okay? So when you stop and really look at collectively what determines the structure of our bodies and our lives, it's the experiences that we carry. But let's hold that for a second, get back to our list, okay? Let's make that whole list out of every single stressor, no matter how large or small. And you look at least 75% of them, and they're what could be referred to as the little ankle biters. They're insignificant little issues that within a month or two could be cleared out of your life and no longer being this burden that you carry on your back. So go through those, set a date of when these will all be removed out of your life. Projects that you're not going to give yourself time. Guess what? When they're in the trash can, you don't even think about them again, right? Chuck them away, give them away, throw them away, whatever. But clear all these little stressors out, because remember, the collective volume of the stress that we choose to hold on to in life is what breaks the body down and breaks our lives down. We all know that accumulative stress is like sand in the bearing that is wearing things out and robbing our energy. Clear as many of those out as you can. Then you take those that are kind of to the top of the list, which are the major issues, the job, the occupation, the car, the house, the area that you live, the relationships, all of these big major ones, major choices, that even though they may be the highlight of life, if they're on that stressor list, there's a reason for it. Now, of course, when each one was brought into our lives, it was with enthusiasm and excitement. Now, what changed? Our perception about that subject, or what changed? This is what needs to be done next, is deciding, okay, is each of these, am I going to keep all these in my life? Evaluate each one of them. Okay, for now, yes. But why are they stressors? Well, maybe the response that we have developed toward some of these issues need to be reevaluated. Maybe the way that we are now perceiving some of these has been different now. What changed? And just by an evaluation and a realization, the primary thought that we should be holding on to as we're looking at each subject is, did I change or did it change? And in most cases, we'd have to admit we changed. Okay? Was that change for the better or for the worse? Or was it just a perception change? Was it an hallucination that we imposed onto it when we chose it in the beginning, and now we've learned better and we need to rethink and maybe plan on an exchange with some major aspect like a job or something like that? But with anything that is that vital in our lives, and I would say that the stressors in our lives is a very vital focus that we should take the time to evaluate and to consider. But we'll find that there are a few of them that it's kind of like when a marriage counselor takes a couple and starts counseling with them, and they realize, wow, I shifted my priorities and my thinking where I let the fire go out. It was my foolishness that shifted my focus from what was really important in this relationship. And that can go for spouses, significant others, or even friends. But what is it that changed? Was it something in here that changed? And can it be changed back, reperceived, and put in the proper viewpoint regarding that subject? But by going through the stressor list, can you see what an advantage that would be to take that backpack off? And now, why did we choose all of those issues that we now call our stressors? Why did we choose them? For our enhancement, to enhance our lives. So now we got to look at each one of them and think, what do I need to do to shift that from a stressor into an enhancement again in my life? So in other words, by the time we get through with this sheet and evaluating and working through each one of these subjects, instead of a whole list of stressors, now we have a half a list of enhancements to our lives. Do you think that would be important to do? Okay, since stress is the foundation of our problems, why not evaluate what stresses us, eliminate the unnecessary ones, and flip the others into enhancements rather than stressors? Good idea? Okay, now, we've shredded our belief systems, we've reevaluated all of our stressors. Now all we have left is the real cause of most of our problems in life, which is the traumatic memory that we all carry, the actual program of our life, the reason why we chose the body that we did, with the programming that it carries. When you think about a stressful experience, a traumatic experience, it's important to understand, let's dissect a traumatic experience. In almost every case, you have a person or a circumstance imposing onto an individual that isn't able to defend themselves from that experience, whatever it is. Now, there may be physical pain involved, but there is always a traumatic emotional component to it. Now, that emotional component actually makes up 90% of it. Now, to simplify that aspect of the trauma, let's give it a realistic name. Let's call it the story. The fabricated story. That fabricated story has so much power, the fabricated story about a broken heart can reach down through the DNA 3 generations and take somebody out with a heart attack. Do you think it's powerful? Do you think these stories are powerful? Yes. You read a really sad story and what do? You cry. Stories are powerful. But when it comes to traumatic experiences, what has the power in that traumatic experience is the story, because the physical pain is healed within a month or so. The worst pain that was inflicted physically is healed in a month. So the actual pain, that aspect of the trauma, is not passed down anywhere, is it? It's the story that has the power. How can we eliminate that story? That's the key here. You know, the core of the story is a perception. I am all alone and I can't call on anybody to stop what is being imposed onto me. There's the story in a nutshell. I am all alone, and I can't call on anyone to stop what is happening to me. In other words, 90% of our trauma in a traumatic experience is the perception of being all alone. And it creates such a horrible feeling. It's like a black hole right in the middle of us. That feeling of being all alone, separate and all alone. The principle of separation, which is a human perception, it is not reality. It is a false perception. It is a lie. It is the most powerful lie in the universe. Because, let's take a second and evaluate, to the degree that we can comprehend, the awareness and the power of soul. I always imagine a family driving down the freeway with an autistic child sitting in the back seat. And the autistic child glances out the window and nonchalantly says, "Oh, there's 53 cows out in the field." The parents pull over and spend the next 10 or 15 minutes counting the cows and say, "Holy cow, there's 53 cows out there." Right? Whatever damage is caused with an autistic child, they're more in touch with soul, and soul can just glance out there and know the exact number of cows out in the field. So the child just opens his mouth and says there's 53 cows out in the field. The awareness level was really brought home to me one day when, how many of you know of Danny and Brinkley? Okay. I was working on him one day over at our other office, and he was in contemplation while I was busy torturing him, and he kind of raised his head up and he says, now here's a guy that's left his body for a significant amount of time, 3 different times. He says, it's amazing. When you leave your body, he says, you can look at this carpet and instantly you know the number of fibers that comprise the whole carpet. He says, you can look at the wall and you know the exact number of particles that make up the entire wall. Do you think soul is a little bit more aware than the brain? Little bit. Okay? Now that's the level of wisdom and awareness that we call intuition. And it's inside of every one of us. And it's the essence of unconditional love and absolute wisdom. With that level of awareness, that's very powerful. It's what religion calls the Holy Ghost, and there are many other terms for it. But it's that immediate aspect of God that is within us and guiding us and trying to get our attention all the time. Right? Just think about that. How much wisdom we have right there at our fingertips. All we got to do is shut up and listen. That's it. Tough job, but that's all we have to do is just listen and obey. Okay? Now, to do the healing through the portals of time requires time traveling. How many of you can time travel? I lied trying to get somebody else to lie with me. You got a time traveling machine, or how do you time travel?
Just go back in time.
With this meat bag?
Well, in our head.
Ah, in your head.
Her little house.
Okay. Because we have these meat bags, we as meat bags are stuck in this time. Unless we have a machine where we can move back through time, we're kind of stuck right here.
Well, time machine, I see.
Yeah. But what aspect of you can time travel?
That soul place.
Soul.
Yeah.
Soul can time travel. Okay, now, remember, 90% of the trauma is caused by what? A perception of being all alone. Now the truth of it is, what creates the black hole of that experience is the perception of being separate from God even, Can't even call on God to stop whatever's happening. It's kind of like, how many of you saw The Count of Monte Cristo? Okay, remember the warden in the prison said, okay, the prisoner was saying how God would help him and do all these good things. And he says, okay, good. I'll tell you what though, I'm going to start beating you, and the second your God shows up, I'll stop. Deal? I'll tell you, in a situation like that where traumatic experiences are being imposed onto us, what does it create? It creates a black hole in us because we perceive ourselves as being separate from God and everyone and everything. It's our perception. It isn't the truth. Because as soon as we leave the meat bag, what do we discover? We're part of the whole. We're like one little drop in the ocean of God. And it's impossible to be separate from God. Okay? That is the actual truth. But as long as we're in the meat bag, we get this perception because it looks like you end over there and I begin over here. So it looks like we're separate. Okay? But that aspect that we are, when we leave the body, we remember again, oh yeah. But as long as we're in the body, we have the perception that we're separate and all alone. And during a time of somebody imposing on to us, it goes deep, almost like a black hole. And that creates 90% of our trauma. And that makes up the majority of the traumatic memory, or the stories that are passed down generationally. Those same stories that a medical doctor will call a genetic predisposition for disease. Okay? Is it starting to make sense now? Okay, with that foundation, it'll be easier to figure out, okay, what really needs to be done to erase the story. Okay? When you get triggered, now let's think about this for a second. What is the difference between somebody making you angry or sad and you getting triggered? Well, in most cases, you can be assured that when you get upset, you're being triggered. Okay? And you've got to be careful as you're doing this procedure, because your brain will actually lie to you and tell you, that would make anybody angry. So, when in doubt, do the procedure anyway, because it doesn't hurt a thing. It will also give you the opportunity to start practicing forgiving others. If you give everybody a get out of jail free card in your brain and just decide, actually it doesn't matter, because I would rather take every opportunity that I have to heal the garbage that I'm carrying, because I want to get rid of it. Okay? Is that worth being a little bit more forgiving? Yeah. It doesn't hurt any of us to forgive somebody, even if they are in the wrong. But if we utilize every single opportunity as an opportunity to heal, what you do is, again, remember, the brain is working just like the immune system. And when somebody says something or does something that triggers us, remember, that's another form of impacting. It's impacting on us because it is us. Again, the brain is scanning the memory. The eyes are looking at the person standing in front of us, and the brain is looking at memories that go all the way back, that are even remotely similar to what the brain is thinking is going on today. It's like a whole string of fish. It's all these nasty experiences. And you can be assured that the stuff that we carry in here is a lot worse than whatever is standing in front of us in almost every case.
And some of it's not ours, because you said it can go back generations. So some of it's mom's and some of it's grandma.
Mom, dad, grandma,
you don't get
grandpa.
to know necessarily.
You don't have to know who it is, when it was,
Right.
nothing.
Okay.
It could be you from last week. It doesn't matter. This is what I refer to as the extended me. Okay? Immediately there are at least 8 people that make up this package. And all the traumatic memory of all 8 are being expressed through this one physical body. There's soul, my body, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, great-grandma, grandpa, whole bunch of people, all expressing their traumatic memory through this one body. And guess what? We're each packages in the same way. That is what, through the principle of expectation, which says, if life beat me up before, what am I going to expect of today? And my DNA and my brain says, oh yeah, life does a pretty good number on us, continually. Okay? Now, how can we change that perception? Because that's a very strong perception for each one of us, so powerful that it molds the way we recreate today. This is also the reason why we take the same cookie cutter that we created yesterday out of, and we swing it over and we create today out of the same cookie cutter. This is the reason why, because we have the same programming influencing us. The only way, it's kind of like having hooks in our belts, and we're sitting here trying to walk forward and we're being held to the same level. Another way of looking at it is all of these traumatic memories reduce our expectation of life. They reduce our expectation of life. Now, we have our desires. Most of us would say, well, that's my expectation of life. No, that's our desires. Our expectation is established by previous circumstances, right? It's kind of an automatic thing. It's set down here. We can force it up, but it'll come back to here. It's like water. It will seek its own level. And our desires are here, and our frustration level is the difference between the two. Do you see that? That is what frustrates us in life, is we desire more, but the automatic procedure of traumatic memory diminishes our expectations and establishes them lower. How do we raise these? There's only one way. We go back and heal the reasons why these are reduced. Now these commercials that are running 24 hours a day in our brain is what is causing us to just naturally respond to life the way that we do. Because that's our comfort zone. The greatest proof of this comfort zone, which you think, comfort zone? That's ridiculous. The proof of this comfort zone of lowered expectation is the average person that wins the lottery and all of a sudden has $1 or $2 million. And it's like this burden that they can't deal with until they're stone broke again, back in their true comfort zone. Every person, they've seen this again and again and again. You win the lottery or you get a whole bunch of money, it pulls you so rapidly out of your comfort zone that it doesn't take long to get back there with no money. They loan it, they give it, they whatever. Just get rid of it. It pulls me out of my comfort zone. Then we get back down here. Okay, how do we get out of that lowered expectation? We heal the experiences that reduced our expectation. Now the bad news is we can't do diddly squat, but the good news is soul can. Okay? But there's an unsaid, think of how powerful soul really is. Could do anything. But soul is so powerful, there's certain spiritual laws that cause soul to have to be careful, because soul cannot take our lessons away from us. Soul cannot undermine our purpose for being in life here, because soul is going through it with us. It's a dance. Why did soul come into life again?
Get wise.
To be forced to be wise. Doesn't do us any harm either, does it? It's a dance. We're working together, soul and brain, both evolving and advancing. Soul is using our fears, our stresses, and our difficulties to become strong. It's like the resistance of weights in a gym. that a weightlifter, a bodybuilder struggles with to tone the body, soul is using the fear and stress of life as a resistance to become stronger and wiser. So we're both working to become wise, and this harmony that we create together. Again, we watch the barometers. What are the barometers? The body and our lives. What is really workable? I love that word, workability. It's like, wow, this word came out of the lab. Workability. If you can apply it into life, it's good. All right? Now, let's get into the procedure of healing through the portals of time. What do we actually do? Person comes along and tells us something, just really makes us angry. If they'd have told the person standing next to us the same thing, they'd have felt like no big deal. That is the difference between being made sad or angry or being triggered. That is being triggered. Now, what is being triggered? It is activating a memory, either from the brain or the DNA, of a past traumatic experience for that individual. Now, if you think about a pistol, you look at a pistol, and every pistol has a trigger, a hammer, and a bullet. A trigger has never hurt anybody. So in other words, the person and what they said is totally benign. Can't harm you. It's like a virus. You know, when you get a cold or a flu, all this mucus and everything coming out of the body, diarrhea or whatever, is that multiplied virus? No, a virus is as innocent as the person that triggered you by what they said. A virus is an activating mechanism that releases the mucus and garbage that the body accumulated. Make sense? Not the enemy. Neither is the person standing in front of you that you're contemplating strangling. They are not the enemy. They are someone who you probably brilliantly telepathically solicited to help you get in touch with this issue. But once you're triggered, what happens? The brain is looking at the memory, wherever it is, whether it's in the brain or in the DNA. And now the brain, remember, is a highly sophisticated program that was developed thousands of years ago, and it calculates all this to come up with one conclusion. Do I punch this person in the nose or do I run? Oh yeah, I guess it isn't so technical. It's kind of an antiquated program, but that's what's going on. And what do most of us do?
Punch.
We implode. We stuff it. We implode. Which is like a dead short in an electrical system.
Yeah.
You know, all that pent-up energy stuffed and held inside to destroy the body again. Because we didn't get a chance to run that energy and get that adrenaline out of our system, and we didn't get the exercise by punching the person to mobilize that energy, and so it's trapped inside to continue breaking the body down. So what can we do instead? Neutralize it as fast as we can. How do we neutralize it? The second we experience that feeling of anger, sadness, or whatever the strong emotion is, throw the attention toward the solar plexus. Why do we throw our attention toward the solar plexus?
Power center.
That is the power center. That is the seat of the soul, and we also have brain cells in that area. It's the highest point of awareness in the body. So we throw our attention here, not that there is a crying child here. That's what I call the extended me. No matter which component of the extended me it is, they're one of our crying children because we are the most advanced out of all of them. They all came before us. So we are the wisest, most advanced, so we get to be Mama and Papa. Now, why do we feel what we feel with that awareness? Because we are empathic mothers and empathic fathers. We can feel the pain of our children, of the crying children. So we throw the attention to this area. Now the next one, I didn't understand when I used to teach this about 8 years ago, But in the last year, I've discovered the fact that we're not really doing anything. We can't do anything because we can't time travel. But we throw our attention to this area, and the key to it is recognize the difference between us and them. The biggest stumbling block for every single person is, I feel sad or I feel angry. Right? No, we are empathic parents. We feel the sadness of a crying child inside either the brain or the DNA, but we feel it right here. We are empathic. We feel the pain of a child. It is not me. Here and now, I am okay, no matter what. I am okay. Okay, I'll give you a quick example of the difference. Could I use you as an example?
Yes.
Okay. You see this? Okay, everybody watching, look. Okay, see, that was in the past. That isn't you now. I flicked your leg. I flicked that person that you were a half a minute ago. But you are okay here and now. It has nothing to do with you. Now that might seem crazy, but that's how we've got to look at that, is even you last week, you're a different person than you are right now. You ever notice how children at different ages, they have the same basic personality, but it just keeps altering? What makes those alterations? Traumatic experiences or perceived traumatic experiences. This is also the reason why we can't remember all the way back to our birth. We got blocks all the way. Every block was a traumatic experience or a perceived traumatic experience. Otherwise, we could easily remember all the way back in one foul sweep. Okay, so with each one of those blocks, especially, that is a different person. If we want to look at it scientifically, it's almost like Sybil. Remember Sybil? 16 different, completely different personalities. Each one born just like each of our personalities. What creates our personality? Trauma or perceived trauma. Each one of us. What is our personality? Our personality is a positive expression that solicits from the world actions that will make sure that that traumatic experience doesn't happen again. That forms each of our personalities. If you study personalities, you'll see that every one of our personalities was created when we were 5 or 6 years of age. Yes, there was the soul influence right from birth and everything, but our personality that could be categorized in one of 9 different personalities was created when we were about 5 or 6 years of age out of some trauma or perceived trauma. Okay? And so let's take a look at everybody that we were from 1 minute ago all the way back, and then our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. We are carrying a whole army of crying children here. Now, with what I'm going to share with you, it doesn't matter whether you have phobias or what. Because guess what? There isn't a person in here that has a phobia or a fear or any of these issues. Because right here and now, everybody is fine. But those of you that believe that you have claustrophobia, we could go over to the aqua massage. I could stick you in there. And you would act like you have claustrophobia. But if you apply what I'm teaching you, you can go in there with no problem at all. But you've got to heal the crying child that is claustrophobic. They're stuck. That child is stuck back in time. Somewhere in the folds of time is that claustrophobic child, and it is a very real experience. Yeah. I'm not going to downplay any of those traumatic experiences that causes any of these phobias or any of these problems, because they are very real, and you feel how real it is every time you get triggered. Very real. Okay? So we don't downplay it. We don't... See, all of psychological counseling is pacifying the mother or the father so that they'll stop crying. and thinking, oh, poor me, I feel sad. Yeah, we're okay. It's not us. Let's be the adults and heal all these children, because they are holding our lives back and stopping us from having free choice. They're holding us into a false perception of life. Again, when you get triggered, it's the brain looking at a previous experience, reading the sad story to you and making you cry. Well, let's neutralize the story, because most of those stories were written immediately after the experience. Okay? The story was usually written immediately after the experience. Let's go back and erase the story, so all there is the physical experience that got healed in a matter of a month or whatever. Okay? I believe that the procedure that I've written about in my book and that I share with all of you, of throwing your attention here and comforting, feeling unconditional love for whoever is here, and comforting them with the words of what you're going through right now is going to be just fine, because you're not alone. I'm right here with you. I believe that that is nothing more than giving soul permission. It's showing soul, hey, look, I'm not boobing and feeling sorry for myself. I'm willing to come out of the little house of horrors and come down here and be in my heart and be available and in service to whoever needs me. It's permission from soul. See, soul is interested in our advancement, not to comfort us and boob us. And as long as we're feeling sorry for ourselves, I feel sad, I feel angry, or whatever, soul will say, well, you can wallow in it as long as you want. When you're through, let me know. Right? Isn't that what nature and life tells us?
Yeah.
Wallow as long, butt your head against the wall as long as you feel that that is what you need to do. But when you smarten up, I'll be here to guide you in a better way. Right? Every aspect of life is the same way. And so soul is just waiting for us to get out of our heads and stop feeling sorry for ourselves and honestly be there in loving support for whoever needs our help. And so from in that position of getting out of our heads and not thinking, I wonder if I'm doing this right. Nothing. Just be there in loving support for whoever needs our help, holding that individual in our imagination, not caring who it is, where they are, nothing. It doesn't matter. It's us getting out of our head and being present in a loving state for whoever. Then soul has permission, our permission. This is the animal's turf. Soul has to have our permission to do this work. And I believe that this is the automatic permission, is when we can get out of our heads and be there in loving support for others. Stop feeling sorry for ourselves. Soul uses the brain as the GPS to know exactly where to go back in time and comfort that individual. And that, just enveloping that personality with unconditional love, diffuses the story. And if it goes back 1 or 2 generations, when that diffusing takes place, guess what? It's immediately erased from your DNA. It's gone. Why? Because it never happened. Soul went back and stopped the story from being written. There is no sad story regarding that issue now. It's gone. Unfortunately, we have a lot of stories we carry. Okay, but if that becomes a priority of our focus, to just every time we get triggered, heal these crying children. And there will be times, I can remember one time when I was triggered and I went down, it was like I had a habit of doing this and I was just clearing all kinds of garbage. I went down this one time and I thought, ugh, come right back up like, dang, I don't like that feeling. See, that's the type of feelings that inspires you to grab a chocolate bar, when it gets triggered up, or to run away or punch somebody. It's one of those. And I thought, oh, wait a second, it's not me, it's not a big deal, it's already happened, it's some poor child back there stuck in time. Went down again for the 15 seconds, cleared it, and it was good. Good and gone. That's the neat thing is, if you don't do this procedure, your brain will sit there and rah, rah, rah for a good half hour or an hour.
Or days.
Or days.
Or years.
I can remember a time I was over here. I was in a parking lot anyway, over here by Harbor, and I was sitting here waiting for this couple to walk in front of me, and they got past me, and I could have gone, but they were an older couple, and you always give them a few extra feet in case they fall over or something. And I was waiting, and this woman over here, she was free to go, but she was sitting here like one, some of those controlling people that, hey, why are you still sitting there? You can go now. and I caught myself as I drove out thinking of all these scenarios of this controlling woman and everything. And it took me about 30 seconds, and I started laughing, and I realized, oh, I'm triggered. I could have gone on like that, coming up with scenarios and grinding on this issue for as long as my foolishness would want to, but I got it, that I was triggered. And so even though I was driving, I threw my attention to the solar plexus, did the procedure, cleared it in 15 seconds. Now, you think, okay, but what all does this matter? What does this matter? What change actually happens? Well, who's the person in our lives that never listens to us? Friends and family, right? Well, here's my 73-year-old aunt who had been suffering from motion sickness since she was 6 years of age. She couldn't even go for a long drive without stopping and throwing up. She couldn't go on boat rides, nothing. Motion sickness all of her life. Imagine what that would do to you to have that problem all your life. Well, anyway, she was telling me about it this one day, and so I told her this procedure, and I thought, well, I owe it to her anyway to let her know, even though I know that she won't listen, because she knew me before I was even born, so why should she listen to me? And so anyway, it was about 4 months later, my brother and I went on a cruise with all of her family, and the third day out, I realized, my gosh, everywhere that I've gone, every activity, she's there. And I asked her, I said, I thought you had this motion sickness and you couldn't be out here, that you were always in the nurse's station. And she says, no, you told me that thing to do and I did it and it cleared it up. See, it was an experience that she had when she was 6 years of age. So it was one that didn't get recreated over and over again, but she suffered with it for an entire lifetime. How long did it take her to clear this lifelong pattern? 15 seconds. 15 seconds. When I was first putting these pieces together, there was a woman over in England that it was really, in fact, I think I wrote about that one in the book. It's that woman that she was about 40 years of age, and she had a cane she'd walk with, and because her lower back was so bad. And I was over setting up a rejuvenation center, and the woman that owned the facility had told her about me before I came, and said that I would be able to help her get the pain out of her back, but it required I inflicted a certain amount of pain to extract her pain. And so that was a little bit of a concern in the back of her mind anyway. So we were visiting all together for about a half hour, and everybody else cleared out of the room, and I already had a couple of cushions, those big fluffy cushions laying on the floor because I didn't have a therapy table or anything. And so I started walking her over to the cushions there, and the closer we got, the heavier she got. And so she stopped, and she was my height, and she looked me right in the eye, and she says, "Is this going to hurt?" And when you feel that big bright red button there, it's, I don't know about you, but it's very tempting for me, because I thought, I know I can guide her through this. And so I looked her back in the eye and I said, "Yes, it is." Straight faced. "Yes, it is." And I could just feel the energy coming out of her body, like a mild panic, like, do I run away now or do I wait a second longer? And so I held her arm and helped her to the cushions, and then helped her down to her knees with me. I mean, it was literally a wrestling match. And there we were on our knees, looking at each other eye to eye, and she says, "Are you going to hurt me?" And I said, "Yes, I am." I mean, what kind of a question is that, you know? But I could feel that she was that close to being triggered when she asked that, so I figured, let's go all the way with it. Yeah. She exploded, and she tried to get up, and luckily she was about 70 or 80 pounds overweight, and so my hand could hold her down, which triggered her the third time. She was ready to kill by that time. I knew if I let this woman if I let her up, she'd have hated me forever. And so I took my fingers like this and started hitting her in the stomach, trying to get her out of her head. And I said, "Karen, get out of your head and get down here and work with me. We can heal this." "No, leave me alone. No. "Karen, get out of your head and come down and work with me. We can heal this and clear it." It seemed like about 20 minutes, but it was probably only about 30 seconds with her screaming and yelling and everybody thinking in the house that I was killing the poor woman. I finally got her out of her head and got her down here to work with me. And I coached her through the procedure. She finally got out of her head. It took a long time. Got her out of her head, and she felt it. She went in, did the healing, and as soon as, instead of 15 seconds, it took her about 30 seconds. But when she finally opened her eyes, she looked at me. She says, "You wouldn't believe it. When you told me that, I felt my father slug me in the mouth and yelling at me." She relived it. It was so real. It had been so conscious with her all those years that she suppressed it, and it was so powerful in her mind. Do you think that would have any effect on the relationships this woman had with husband and boyfriends? You better believe it. But in 15 seconds, she healed that traumatic experience that had modeled her life and inhibited her relationships since she was 10 years old. 15 seconds cleared that.
Could you explain the process again?
Yes.
Use her as an example.
Sure. Actually, she was a difficult one, so let's choose something easier. Okay. Let's take a friend of mine out in the desert who, the husband was an Italian artist, and he's a great chef. He was standing at the stove preparing dinner, and he just nonchalantly mentioned that his wife couldn't even stand the thought of walking barefoot on the grass, and there is no way in the world anybody could ever get her to walk barefoot on the grass. She knew me well enough. I grabbed her hand and we went to the backyard and sat on a cement wall. She knew what I was going to do because I'd helped her through a few other things. And I had her imagine walking on the grass. Okay, now remember, she was okay. The woman sitting next to me was okay. But what was being triggered up was a young girl, probably her, that either stories or maybe an experience of walking barefoot on the grass just totally freaked her out. Either she saw a snake in the grass or whatever, it doesn't matter. But something freaked her out as a little girl is most likely what happened. So, when she would get triggered with the thought of walking barefoot in the grass, that little girl, the memory of that little girl would get triggered up, and she would feel it right here. And she would feel the little girl's panic and fear. But being an empathic mother, she felt like, I'm just afraid of walking on the grass barefoot. Right? Everybody can relate to that? Okay? It makes you feel like you've got the phobia or the fear or whatever when you feel the child's fear. Okay? I had her take off her shoes and picture herself walking on the grass barefoot. And of course it freaked her out. I guided her to do the healing, and I could feel, okay, that didn't completely clear it. So I had her reach out with her toe and touch the grass with her toe. Freaked her out again, she did the healing. Then I grabbed her hand and we went for a walk in the bare grass with zero problem.
She did the healing. What does that mean?
What is she telling the child?
When she touched the grass, it made her feel that horrible feel of fear of walking barefoot in the grass. And so I threw her attention, I had her throw her attention to her solar plexus, because remember, it isn't her, and it's only a memory and the awareness right here. And so the whole goal was she had to get out of her head and stop believing that she is afraid of walking barefoot in the grass. It's not her. It's whoever she's aware of from the past right here. So throw your attention here, get out of your head, and feel unconditional love for this person, and keep reassuring them. What you're going through right now is going to be just fine because you're not alone. I'm right here with you. And she did that for 15 seconds, just kept feeling that and repeating it, and it healed that child. Now, what healed the child? Anything she did? Nothing. Nothing that she did helped that child back in time. But it was complete permission to her soul to go back through the portals of time and envelop that child, even if it was her at 4 years of age, envelop her with unconditional love and cleared it. And so immediately, because the story was erased before it was created, she felt the immediate relief. To such a degree that when she stepped on the grass then, there was zero reaction, no fear, no problem, and we went for a walk through the grass. Now I'm going to tell you the really crazy part. I was sitting I think it was about 2 years ago, I was thinking, I wonder what it would be like to be on the receiving end of this.
And to what?
To be on the receiving end of healing through the portals of time. And all of a sudden, I remembered a time when I was 17, when I was on the receiving end of healing through the portals of time. Now, obviously, all of our brains are saying, well, that's quite crazy because you didn't even develop it then. You were 17 years old. I don't understand enough about time to be able to explain it, but obviously my future self came back or sent soul back to do this procedure. Because my father was, Dean believes that his grandfather was a sweet old man. He met him about 30 years too late. when all the fight and fire was gone. When I knew him, when I was a bit younger, he wasn't quite the sweet old man that he was later. As Bill Cosby would say, they're trying to get their way into heaven after that. Anyway, he was physically abusive. And he just, I was 17 years of age. And, when I was 15, I remember one day he informed me that I was too big to spank, that I was big enough for a real beating. And so he proceeded to give me the adult version of his expressions. Anyway, at 17, he had just completed his activities upon my physical body. And usually in a situation like that, stop and think about it, what it would feel like for a 17-year-old to get physically beat on by his father, and what would be the thought immediately after? It'd be hate, anger, resentment, and humiliation, all these emotions. I stepped away from the experience. I could hear music in the back of my head. I felt a feeling of euphoria. And I remember very clearly back then thinking, what in the heck? This is so weird. It wouldn't have mattered if my arm was cut off. It was such an elevated feeling, and a feeling of peace, and it was even better than laughing gas. I remember just feeling that, hearing the music in the back of my head, and feeling a feeling of peace, like I can't remember another time in my life where I felt that level of peace. And it was immediately after. I just stepped away, and it was immediate. Well, you can be assured that the story in that case was not written. Because it was when I stepped away that I would have written the story of hate, anger, resentment, and just wait till I get bigger and stronger and all this other baloney, right? The story wasn't written because I was enveloped with absolute unconditional love, and it stopped me from writing the negative story. So Dean does not have that story in his DNA. It was never written. Is that clearer how the procedure really works? Mm-hmm. We can't do anything, but we have to get out of our heads and stop feeling sorry for ourselves, which will automatically give soul permission to go back through the portals of time, envelop that younger person with unconditional love, and it really doesn't matter what physical pain they experienced or whatever. It is so elevating, it is so peaceful, it doesn't matter. The story will then not be written of how terrible that experience was. So there's no story to go down through the brain or the DNA. Any questions about procedure here?
Just a couple of quick comments. First of all, excellent lecture. Maybe one of your best, maybe one of the most, maybe one of the most important. I would strongly, are you wearing a recording device? Okay.
I hope it's recording.
When will that data, what you just said tonight, be available out to the group?
I'd like 20 copies, please.
I don't know.
Tomorrow?
I'm triggered.
Oh no, that was our sound man that said that.
When you do know, I would encourage Rob, Maria, this gentleman, and this gentleman who came 15 to 30 minutes late to be able to fully open the safe. And what I mean by that is like there's 3 or 4 numbers. They missed the first number. That was very important. I mean, this is very serious stuff that if people don't hear this from the beginning, they may not get it. And
This is the first time it's ever been presented complete enough to thoroughly understand it.
right. And I'm just saying, out of these 4 people, maybe one of them needs it more than anybody. And that first 20 or 30 minutes was so important for setting the stage that I would encourage those 4 that missed parts of it.
We'll try and get it figured out to get it on the website where you can go and listen to it again and again or whatever.
And if I could make a follow-up comment, you know, I was blessed today to walk on the beach and be out in the sun with my shirt off. So sunshine is obviously important to everyone. Breathing is obviously important to everyone. Your supplements are important, but it goes without saying, if people don't get what you're saying about this, you can take all the supplements you want in the world. They can be yours, which are supreme and the best. They're not going to move forward. And sometimes we're so used to touching kinesthetic things. Oh, I can take this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to do more. It's less simple of this aspect of the holistic balance. That if that doesn't play along with oxygen and sunshine, people aren't really going to, right?
We're more powerful than all the treatments on the planet, and we will, like water finding its level, we will come back to that comfort zone of lowered expectation of life, and that's what will be expressed through the body. So yes, appreciate that, David. All the supplements and all the therapies in the world isn't as powerful as each one of us. We are literally the authors of our lives, and this is what inhibits our authoring of creation of a level of health where disease can't even exist. And that is the goal that I want to set for everyone, is follow the... I've been at this for 40 years. You don't have to recreate the wheel. I'm finding what works and weeding out what doesn't work so that everybody can achieve that goal of creating a level of health where disease can't exist. Okay? It's definitely possible. Yes, ma'am.
I want to agree with David. This was the best lecture ever. So thank you for that. One approach that I use with biofeedback is in a